This is Akashvani Chennai. In our weekly program tonight, we bring to you an interview, Temples, Cosmic Symbolism of Indian Ethos. Historian and author Dr. Chitra Madhavan is being interviewed by Amrit Bhargav.
Our guest today is Dr. Chitra Madhavan, an acclaimed historian and a distinguished scholar. A thoroughbred intellectual in the highest traditions of scholarship in Indian culture, epigraphy, and temple architecture, her nuance in detail has found all-round recognition. Holding an MA and MPhil from the Department of History, University of Madras, and a doctoral degree from the Department of Ancient History and Archaeology, University of Mysore, she is a recipient of 2 postdoctoral fellowships from the Department of Culture, Government of India, and the Indian Council for Historical Research, New Delhi. As the author of over 9 books, her work on the history and culture of Tamil Nadu was an encyclopedic treatise, so factually rich. Her other work on Sanskrit education and literature in ancient and medieval Tamil Nadu was a tribute to India's educational heritage. Her lectures on temple architecture have drawn widespread interest, and her approach to the subject is always factual yet totally deep and profound. Dr. Chitra Madhavan joins us for a conversation on temples, cosmic symbolism of the Indian ethos. Welcome to the studios of All India Radio, ma'am.
Thank you very much for inviting me here.
While we get into the interview and before we get into the subject, I would like to get a bit biographical. Could you please tell us of your foray into temple history?
Well, I decided to study history, ancient history in particular, and that of India, and particularly South India, even when I was in school. It so happened that we went for a holiday, my parents and I, to a few places in South India. And we just so happened to go to Sri Rangam, into the Ranganatha Swami temple, and also to the temples of Halebid and Belur of the Hoysala dynasty in Karnataka. I think that made a profound impact on me, and since then I have been wanting to study temple architecture and sculpture. So that was the beginning, and that was when I was, I think, in the 8th standard.
And now, coming to the story behind the subject and object of your research, temples. What is the oldest temple in South India? Is there anything like that? And could you also tell us of how building temples became an art of enterprise for dynasties?
So it would be very difficult to pinpoint which temple is the oldest, whether it is for Shiva or Vishnu or Devis. Very difficult, because you see, are we then talking about the main murti inside the sanctum, or are we talking about the built up structure? So what can sometimes happen is the image may inadvertently get damaged, whatever the cause, and another murti may be placed in the main sanctum. Take, for example, that of Attivaradar. That is very close in time. We saw it in 2019. So Attivaradar, the Varadaraja Perumal made of the wood of the fig tree, was the image that was in worship in the main sanctum. At some point of time, it was taken out, and then this image of stone was placed in the main Garbhagriha. So then how do we say which is the oldest temple? Similarly, the walls of the main sanctum in some temples have been pulled down because they were disintegrating, deteriorating, and a new sanctum would have been built. For example, suppose the sanctum was very old and it was replaced in the 17th century. Can we say it is a 17th century sanctum? No, it was rebuilt in the 17th century. Sometimes we have evidence, sometimes we don't have evidence. So it is really quite impossible for us to say which the oldest temple is.
Do you think that temples have a far greater role than being just religious places of worship, both past, present, and future?
Certainly, they have a much greater role than being only places of worship, though I will highlight the fact that they were primarily meant to be places of worship, and that is how they are, and that is how they should continue. However, in times bygone, temples played a huge role in society, in the social, economic, and cultural spheres. Let us take the cultural arena first. You see, a deity, according to our scriptures, our agamas, are to be offered 16 different things every day. They are called Shodasha Upachara. Upachara as an offering. And among the offerings are, lighting a lamp, lighting an incense stick, etc., which we are all aware of. Music and dance are also part of the Shodasha Upacharas. Therefore, they had musicians performing and dancers performing in front of the main deity every day, perhaps several times a day. So therefore, these performing arts were an integral part of temples, temple worship, so to speak. So there you have it as a cultural arena. Today we are hosting concerts, music and dance inside the temple premises. But that is fine, absolutely as it should be. But those days it was there as mandatory. It was part of the temple ritual. Secondly, there were also Veda Patashalas functioning inside the temple premises in big mantapas, small mantapas, etc. Not only were the Vedas taught, but the ancillary subjects were also taught, like grammar, Vyakarana, logic, Tarka, etc. And if you had to have a set of students and teachers on campus, you must also have a library. So we have some inscriptions telling us that there were libraries functioning in Chidambaram temple, Srirangam temple, etc. There may have been many other temples with libraries, not of the modern kind that we are used to seeing, but those with manuscripts kept over there. So libraries were also there, educational centers were also there. Temples served as banks, where you could deposit your money and earn interest. All that information is in the form of inscriptions on the walls of temples. These places also where the local panchayats were held in the mantapas. And imagine yourself to be a traveler back in the 16th century, 15th century or 8th century. You're coming from one village to another village to pray in that particular temple. Where would you stay? What would you eat? Where would you bathe before going into a temple? So you can have a bath in the temple tank, the Pushkarini. You could stay in the temple mantapa. That was enough shelter from the rain and the sun and the wind. And you could partake of the temple's prasadam. That would be your meal. That would be more than enough. So look at the role the temple played, and as an employer, while the temple is being built, even after it was built, look at the number of people that were in the employment directly and indirectly. So the temple was and will be much more than just a religious institution, though I repeat, primarily a religious institution.
Truly, the multi-dimensional and multifunctional role of temples, as we heard just now. And in the repertoire of scholarship, please tell us of other historians who have studied temple architecture, and also some of them who have inspired you and whose work continues to enliven the study of history, especially in this area of temple architecture.
As there are many great scholars, I am surely omitting many names for want of time, who have done great research, lifelong research on the history of India, especially history of South India, because that is my field of study, and on temple architecture, iconography and epigraphy. So many great scholars, both from India and abroad. Some of the pioneering epigraphists who studied the inscriptions on the walls of temples were German, like Hulch, etc. Many people were there, great Indians also. But because my study is limited to South India and especially to Tamil Nadu, I would like to mention the name of the father of South Indian history, as we call him, Professor K. Neelakanta Shastri, but for whom the history of South India, history of Tamil Nadu, especially the history of the Chola dynasty, would not have become as famous as it is today. And of his student, Dr. C. Meenakshi, who unfortunately died very young before she could reach her 35th birthday. What a great service for Pallava history. Without her, the dynasty of the Pallavas would not again have come to light the way it has. I can quote several other people Dr. R. Nagaswamy, who passed away recently, my own professor and guru, Dr. K.V. Raman, Dr. K.R. Srinivasan of the ASI, who have done great work, great service to our culture, and who have left behind in the form of their lectures, which have been written down, though because those days we didn't have video recording, audio recording, and in the form of their books. These are treasures that we have.
About the scholars themselves, how did they balance fieldwork in terms of archaeology and the textual study and analysis in presenting it to the readers?
It would have been very difficult in those days to do field work, basically because of how the roads were and the accommodation that you could find in villages and small towns, and travel, basically. Honestly, don't know how they really worked so hard in the sun and the rain. And imagine a lady at that time like Dr. C. Meenakshi traveling long distances. It is even said, a biographer of hers, that while she was climbing up a temple wall, a snake suddenly sprang out and almost stung her, and it is said she fell over backwards. So these are the different rigors that they have undergone, and they've done yeoman service for us, great service. And they definitely would not have had that much of literature as we have, because those days very few people were working on this subject, and whatever they read up in the form of inscriptions, etc., it is mostly their work of these pioneering scholars that we are dependent on today.
Your work also involves the study of temple inscriptions. Could you please delve into the history of inscribed writings found in temples and their scripts and historicity?
So we have basically two types of inscriptions. One are the stone inscriptions that you see etched on the walls of temples, pillars, etc. The other is the copper plate inscriptions, where when basically they are almost all royal documents. When a king wished to give land or money to scholars, to temples, etc., they would be inscribed on sheets of copper. Those mainly you can find in museums across the world. Even our own Madras Museum has a whole beautiful collection of copper plate inscriptions. So inscriptions are in different languages and different scripts all over India. Basically, young students don't understand the difference between a language and a script. For example, Tamil inscriptions are in the Tamil script. In Tamil Nadu, before Tamil script, we had something called the Brahmi script. So Tamil was written in Brahmi. That Brahmi has slowly turned into Tamil, and we understand that just like languages, scripts also have an evolution. So if we say we know to read Tamil, we understand Tamil today. If you look at an inscription of the Chola times, of the Pallava times, they may be very difficult to read for the person who knows Tamil today, because the script over the last 1,000, 1,200, 1,500 years has undergone a lot of evolution, as has the language. I'm talking only about Tamil Nadu now. We have Sanskritam inscriptions, but those initially were not written in the Devanagari script that we know today, the script in which we write Hindi and Sanskrit. They were written in a script called Grantha. You can see them on the walls of temples. Looks like Tamil, but if you start reading it, you understand it's not Tamil. It is a script called Grantha that was employed. So we have Vatteluthu, we have Grantha, we have Tamil script that has evolved over the centuries. All of this you can see on the walls of temples. Brahmi also.
The scripted history of Tamil Nadu and India are amply demonstrated by those inscriptions, as Dr. Chitra Madhavan just said, where we heard the interesting interplay of history, heritage, and hoary pasts. Dr. Chitra Madhavan, an eminent historian on South Indian temples, we shall endeavour to get into some of the finer parts of the aesthetics and historical value of culture that is uniquely ours. After all, what is that crest jewel of Tamil culture? Temples, which are scattered across this ancient peninsula. Don't we speak of the massive monolithic sculptures of the Pallavas, the deeply carved motifs at the great living Chola temples, the utter human genius that created the Sesharaya Mantapa at Srirangam, the living monuments of that great civilization called Hampi, the sacred radiance that surrounds the Mokshapuri of Kanchi, or the rare portrayals of the Vilvalaitha Vinayakar at Udayarpalayam or the Villendiya Velan at Nagapatnam, the list is engagingly endless. Ma'am, you have done a marathon set of series of lectures on temple architecture and their connected history. Could you please tell us of your inspiration behind that series and how it all began at Tattwaloka?
So many years ago, I was introduced to Tattwaloka by a common friend, and the organizers of Tattwaloka have been extremely kind to invite me repeatedly to do series on basically history of South India and temple architecture. So I am very interested in taking the nuances of our temple architecture and sculpture and inscriptions to the general public. I feel that for far too long this subject has remained in the hands of academics, scholars. The layperson is very interested in knowing about our temples and for the details, not just visiting the temples for religious purposes, but for knowing about it. And the books that are there on the subject are extremely serious reading, so they are not able to plow through it, understandably so. So if we show lots of photographs of different parts of the temples and explain about the layout of the temple and, as I said, the details of the sculptures, how to identify certain icons, images, and also a little bit of details about the inscriptions, people who go visiting temples will start noticing all these details. That is my wish, which is why I am doing this.
On the same subject of temple architecture, a special word on the murals and fresco traditions of Tamil history is also relevant. It is believed that the murals at the Devashraya Mandapam at Thiruvarur rival that of the Sistine Chapel at Rome, and the frescoes of Sittanna Vasal and the paintings that once surrounded the Potramarai Kulam at the Madurai temple, also closely followed by the dashing shades of the Kallaragar temple at Tirumalirunjolai, conveyed some of the deepest meanings of Puranic and historical lore. Could you please tell us about that tradition of murals and frescoes?
Certainly. Tamil Nadu has a very long history, a glorious history of paintings on the walls, ceilings, etc. of temples. Sittanna Vasal would be one of the earliest, and we see on the pillars and on the ceiling, unfortunately now today damaged due to weathering and wanton damage, etc. Very, very beautiful murals of the Pandyan period. Then if you come to the Kailasanatha temple in Kanchipuram of the 8th century, you have some Pallava paintings, remnants of Pallava paintings. All these are very vivid colors which have become muted due to age. Naturally, that is bound to happen. But even in the fragments of paintings that we have, we can understand the dexterity of these artists, these painters of times bygone. Then we can come to the Tanjavur temple. In an inner passage around the main sanctum, some glorious paintings are there. I'll just give you one example. One is Sundaramurti Nayanar on a white elephant, and Cheraman Perumal, another great Shaivite devotee, on a horse going to Kailash. So that is one. There is an excellent Dakshinamurti. Rajaraja Chola and 3 of his queens worshipping in the Chidambaram temple. That is a very, among many murals there. And like you said, in various other parts, Meenakshi temple it was there, Azhagar, Kovil, very many places we have a history of murals. We also have some Vijayanagar and Nayaks. The Nayaks were the governors, feudatories of Vijayanagara in Tamil Nadu. Paintings of those times are also there in the Varadaraja Perumal temple in Kanchipuram. In the Varadaraja Perumal temple, we have the 108 Divya Deshams. The Divya Deshams are places which have been sung in praise of by the Alvars or the 12 great Vaishnavite devotees. So these 108 Divya Deshams have been portrayed in the form of paintings near the main sanctum of the Varadaraja Perumal temple. These are 17th century. In the 17th century, how could they have gone to all these Divya Deshams in India and in Nepal and have understood? The details are amazing. You have the main god You have the Utsava Murti or the processional deity. You have the painting of the goddess of the temple. Then you also have an image of the temple tank, whether it's square or the round, the circular. That detail is also there. I mean, this is mind blowing. Just a few examples of the many paintings, and we do of course understand these are all organic colors, the paints, natural colors made with whatever natural material that they could find. Even the brushes of course made of natural wood, and the bristles with perhaps squirrel hair, etc. Fantastic tradition.
So, definitely, South Indian temple history was not just a story of royal patronage, but also about an art that flourished. Your lecture on the temples of Lepakshi were immensely appreciated. What is that special aspect of Lepakshi that made you choose that theme?
So, in Lepakshi, which is in Andhra Pradesh and not too far from Bangalore, we have this Vijayanagara period temple belonging to the time of King Achyutaraya, who was the successor and brother of the famous Krishnadevaraya. Now, that temple is under the care of the Archaeological Survey of India. It's a protected monument. So, what makes it so special? It is a standalone temple for Veerabhadra Swami, who is a manifestation of God Shiva. Separate temples for Veerabhadra Swami are known in various parts of India, especially South India, and especially from the Vijayanagara times, but none as big and as elaborate as the one in Lepakshi. So the Lepakshi temple is known. When you think Lepakshi, people think murals, because you have Vijayanagara paintings in the Mantapa which are really worth their weight in gold. There are Puranic themes, of course, of various manifestations of Shiva. You also have the portrait paintings of Veeranna and Virupanna, the two chieftains who were responsible for constructing that temple. You have Kalamkari patterns over there. Lepakshi was the center of Kalamkari, not now, but in the past. So textile designers go there, and you can actually see the ladies and men in the paintings wearing ikat textiles, etc. All that also you can find out from those paintings. Many things are there, typically following the Vijayanagara pattern of paintings with borders, etc. The sculptures in Lepakshi temple, again monolithic, part of the pillars, I can only use the word mind-blowing. There is a separate Kalyana Mantapa that is unfinished, which is connected with the Sthala Puranam of the temple. When these two brothers were building the temple, Vijayanagara emperor suspected them of taking state money to build it, and therefore the chieftain took out his eyes and smashed them against the wall of the temple. So that is the name Lepa Akshi. Aksha is eye, and Lepanam is anointment, or the colored eye. That's basically what it means. So it's a little gory, but they show you a particular spot in the temple where he actually threw his eye on the wall, and the Kalyana Mantapa is unfinished because he couldn't complete it. The sculptures there are also very extraordinary. And one more thing about the temple that is very famous is the hanging pillar. They had created a Mantapa in such a way that I am not an engineer, I don't know how it was done basically, but one particular pillar was made in such a way that it did not rest on the ground, literally hanging. See, though it is said that a British engineer tried to find out how this could be done and meddled with it in such a way that now one little part actually rests on the ground. It was actually a few inches from the ground, one pillar. How they constructed it, I had no idea. Even now, you can pass a piece of paper underneath and it will come out.
Truly, Lepakshi is definitely a presentation of Indian temple architecture in the microcosm. Whenever we listen or tune into your talks, we find that you relate the histories and depictions in temples that are found in the same region, although separated by historical periods. What is that about?
So, one series of my lectures was on Vijayanagara architecture and sculpture. So when we think Vijayanagar, we think Hampi, which was their capital. It was called Vijayanagar Vidyanagar, it is now called Hampi. So there you have many monuments, sculptures, monolithic images, temples, and civil architecture, etc. You have a lot of that. But other than Hampi, in places, as I said just now, like Lepakshi, there is another place called Tadipatri in Andhra Pradesh that has immensely beautiful Vijayanagara temples. In parts of Tamil Nadu, in the Vijayanagara era, we didn't have new temples being built. They added substantially to the already existing temples by way of gopurams, mantapams, new sannadhis, etc. So I discuss all that in my series.
Temple tourism is now not just religion inspired but also a matter of historical and social interest. Would you want India to have an agenda for taking this initiative to its next level, and if so, how do we do that?
Most certainly, this aspect of tourism has to be focused on and implemented. There are very many people, lay persons, even youngsters, lots of youngsters, I'm so happy to say this, who are interested in going to places of historical importance, religious importance as well. It's a combination. And wanting to learn more firsthand on site about all of this. So, we have to encourage it. It is one, theoretical knowledge is one thing, in sitting in a school or college or studying about it, or even listening to a lecture in an auditorium with slides being presented. That is one thing. It is quite another to go on site and see all this, and it is completely a different learning, and it should be encouraged. This religious tourism, or call it heritage tourism, whatever it is, needs to be taken forward.
Dr. Chitra Madhavan, an eminent historian, who has been in conversation with us on the aesthetic and art related heritage of South Indian temples. We shall continue to delve into some of the nuanced portions of South Indian history and the value of periodization in South Indian history, along with the aesthetics and architectural value of temples. In tracing the story of temples, your heritage walks have attracted a large number of participants, cutting across age groups. What is the role played by heritage walks and tours in increasing awareness about our temples, and what was your first heritage walk?
Coming to the last question first, I don't remember which my first heritage walk was, but over the years I have done a lot of heritage walks in Chennai and many heritage tours outside of Chennai to various parts of South India, North India, and even to Cambodia and Sri Lanka. So basically, when a person, we go as a group, and there are lots of youngsters, people across all ages, all professions, it's just a love for heritage that brings them to these walks, to these tours. And it is a different learning, a different mindset when you're on site and you're looking at for example, Hampi. If you read about Hampi, or even if you see pictures on the screen in a classroom or in an auditorium of Hampi, it will not prepare you for the real thing when you go into that heritage zone. It is completely different. You're seeing ruins all around you. You're actually touching, feeling everything, the sculptures on the walls of temples, etc. You have the river Tungabhadra gushing on one side. You have hills, ancient hills on the other, and all resonating with names from the Ramayana, Rishyamukha, Matanga Parvata, etc., etc. It honestly does something to you. And then in your mind, you can relive that war of 1565 and how Hampi totally got ruined. Not only Hampi, you can go to any other place. We just spoke about Lepakshi, or you go to Srirangam, or you go to Madurai. That presence in a temple or in a heritage site is completely different. And that learning experience is definitely different.
You mentioned Cambodia and Sri Lanka. Having toured the civilizational map of temples extensively, which includes Angkor Wat and its associated monuments, what is that brand of Pan-Asian culture of temples that are Indian in origin?
So when you visit Cambodia and you walk into all those ancient temples, be they Buddhist or be they Hindu, which are not in very active worship anymore, and you sit down and study the architecture and the sculptures and the inscriptions, you clearly understand the India connection. There is so much, every other thing. But at the same time, you find some sculptures in Cambodia from our epics and Puranas, from our Itihasas and Puranas that you don't find in India, which is, for one particular example, in a temple called Bante Sri, which is a Shiva temple, no worship now, you find a sculpture of like a Rakshasa carrying Sita, and Rama and Lakshmana on either side brandishing their swords or some weapon. So immediately on seeing it, any person will say, oh, that is Ravana carrying Sita. But how wrong that can be, because when Ravana carried Sita, Rama and Lakshmana were not there to protect her. So there is some huge gigantic figure carrying Sita, and Rama and Lakshmana are also there. So you have to go back to the Valmiki Ramayana and understand that is not Ravana but a person called Virada. Virada, when they were in the forest, carried away Sita, and Rama and Lakshmana then rescued her by killing him. So these are the kind of sculptures there in Cambodia that you don't have in India, from where all these epics and Puranas went over there. There is again a very nice sculpture of the Kandava Vana Dahana, when Arjuna and Krishna go into that forest and start burning it. That is a sculpture that you don't have in India.
We have now crisscrossed the Bay of Bengal into the greater Indian Ocean, and we realize that our temples are giant representations of Puranic social and historical lore. How do enthusiasts of temple history perceive this literal ocean of intertwined histories and stories? Since doing that enriches appreciation, are there basic readings that are actually required before we embark on these exercises?
It would be immensely useful if people could read up on all the articles and books that are there before going into temples. It would really help. But unfortunately, not many people have the time to do it. But of course, if you have the inclination, you will have the time. But sometimes we are time strapped. Therefore, when people go into temples, they are unable to understand many of the sculptures that are there or enjoy the architecture because they are not attuned to it. They don't know about it, though they may want to. This is where I would think the use of audio guides should be encouraged in many of these historical places, or there should be trained guides over there where you can, give them a professional payment and they could show you around. These things are, I think, very essential in today's world, when more and more people are trying to get interested in India's ancient heritage and culture and history and tying it up with Puranic lore. It is absolutely mandatory that we do this.
We're talking about the timelines of history, and there are certain oft-quoted golden ages in all these timelines. Do you believe in that classification at all?
Well, all that glitters is not gold. So everything that is said to be a golden age may not actually be that golden. Everything about a particular epoch cannot be golden. But why historians have termed certain periods like Guptas or Cholas as the golden age is because the output has been extraordinary. We'll talk, the Guptas have been well documented. Not many people know why the Cholas should also be documented as a golden age. Look, first of all, at the places they ruled over. Almost entire South India at one point of time, including Sri Lanka, which Rajaraja and Rajendra conquered. And then the Chola navy, which according to a very great historian called R. Satyanath Iyer, he described it as a Chola lake because they could just go and come. And Indonesia was also conquered in the time of Rajendra Chola, parts of Malaysia. The trade with various countries, especially of Southeast Asia, and their influence on those countries, trade with China, lucrative trade with China was there. They had mega trade guilds because trade was booming. Internal trade in India, external trade overseas, that was there. Agriculture in the heartland of the Kaveri Basin, definitely agriculture was also booming. That riches led to a lot of output in the form of performing arts, in the form of temple building, sculpture, Chola inscriptions galore everywhere, not only in India and other places also. You can actually call that a golden period. The flip side is always there.
Mentioning of the Chola heritage, you touched upon the Chola heritage, where Tamil Nadu is home to a large number of medieval bronzes, mostly from that period of history. Is there anything special or unique about these collections, especially of the various icons of Lord Nataraja, and could you please tell us of its historicity?
So, among the bronzes that were produced in India, the Chola bronzes occupy a very special position. They are as natural as they can get. Words will not suffice to describe a Chola bronze. You could get lost just looking at a Chola masterpiece. Yes, their Natarajas are particularly world famous. And we have to seek the reason why they created so many masterpieces of Natarajas, and why they had Nataraja Utsavamurtis in bronze installed in that many temples, whether they were temples that they themselves built, the Cholas, or temples that belonged to times before theirs, like the Pallava and Pandya period temples also they installed Natarajas. But why this Nataraja Bhakti? Because the Nataraja in Chidambaram, Thillai, was their Kuladeivam, that was their family deity. And we have inscriptions galore where they say they are devotees at the lotus feet of Lord Nataraja, which is why the Nataraja image. And absolutely amazing is the dexterity with which these artisans, we don't have the names of these people who made these bronze images, and made of that very difficult process, age-old process called the lost wax process. That is how they made them. Imagine any Nataraja first being made of wax. Just imagine. And even the toenails, the fingernails, the lips, the eyebrows. Oh, I could wax eloquent on how beautifully these Natarajas are made. Sometimes there is a gap, between the foot and the Apasmara Purusha, or that creature that is there below the foot of Nataraja, which is actually representing our ego or ignorance. The foot of Nataraja does not sit flat on the back of Apasmara Purusha. Sometimes there's a gap. So imagine that gap would have had to be there in the wax itself.
It is said that Bharat is an amalgam of Bhava, Raga and Tala. On these related themes of music and dance that form an essential part of our culture, what is the relationship between music, dance and our temples?
Very much. They were part of what we call our Shodasha Upacharas, or the 16 different offerings given to a deity in a temple on a daily basis. Music and dance, Sangeetam and Natyam were there. So, as I always say, today when you want to get a child interested in music and dance, you have to teach him or her, and then take the child to an auditorium, a sabha, where he will listen to music and dance performances. Go back 1000 years or more than 1000 years, most of the community lived around temples, and music and dance were part of the temple rituals. So when you went to a temple, a child went there even to play in the courtyard, whatever. He would listen to music, he would look at the dance, he would watch that visual art, and it would be ingrained into him. He would listen to the Vedas, he would listen to the Nalayana Divya Prabandham of the Alvars or the Devaram of the Nayanmars. All that would get into a child. Even he would grow up listening to all of this, seeing all of this, and it would be part of the general ethos of that village, basically. It was not something that was injected artificially.
With this, we come to the end of our interview with Dr. Chitra Madhavan, an eminent historian who has been in conversation with us on the rich timelines and dimensions of South Indian history, and demonstrating the timeless truth that temples are the cosmic symbolism of our civilizational ethos. On behalf of the studios at All India Radio, I convey my gratitude to Dr. Chitra Madhavan for sparing her time for this interview.
You just heard the interview with Dr. Chitra Madhavan, historian and author, titled Temples, Cosmic Symbolism of Indian Ethos. She was interviewed by Amrit Bhargav. This program came to you from the studios of Akashvani, Chennai.